Okay, I would like to introduce you to my research team. Oh, the previous one, please. Thank you. So you have me on the right. I already had my presentation, but I'm working with two amazing people. Professor Li Wei is the director and dean of UCL Institute of Education. I'm extremely lucky to have him as one of my supervisors in my team. And he works in the field of applied linguistics, so trying to understand how we can apply language learning in real settings like the classroom. And then we have Professor Roberto Filippi, my other supervisor, and he's the director of the Multilanguage and Cognition Lab at UCL, which is what the moderator briefly mentioned. What we do at the lab is we try to understand, we do a lot of research and there's a lot of publications happening to try and understand how children who speak more than one language grow up in terms of cognitive development, creativity, brain development, and is also the founder of Bilingualism Matters London. So yeah, very excited to have them on my team. So we can move on to the next slide. So why is it important to look at multilingual education and bilingual education now? Well, as you know, language is London is extremely multilingual, and we have an increasingly growing number of multilingual children in London. And what we see from research and from the data, however, is that these children lack the educational support that they need. So what happens a lot of times in the classroom is that if you arrive in the UK and you're just starting to learn English, you're usually classed as in need of special education, sometimes erroneously, when actually you just have English as your second language. So things like this happen a lot of time. So we're trying to understand how we can avoid them and make the classroom a bit more inclusive. We can move on to the next one. Yeah, so I was talking about London and how London is a multilingual reality. We have over 300 languages that are spoken in London and in the classroom. So children can actually speak so many languages, but in the classroom, they're just only allowed to speak one language, which is English. And there's this barrier where like, they're not allowed to speak with their friends many times in their own language because now you're at school and now only English. And however, we have 1 in 5 children that have English as an additional language, which is a huge percentage in London. And this is not just London, but it's many globalized countries and cities just like London. Yeah, okay, we can move on. And unfortunately, this barrier and this idea that we can only speak English in the classroom has many social implications, including belonging, because children feel like they don't really belong in the class because they cannot express their culture, their language. And so what children might say is, at home I speak Arabic with mom, but at school I'm not allowed. And so this creates a sense of minority language, so which is an idea that I would like to exclude from our dictionaries because no language should be considered a minority. And so the reason why this happens, so why do we have only monolingual classrooms and why is English the only language allowed? Well, the reason for that is that there is this myth among educators, teachers, but also parents that actually children will get confused if they're exposed to more than one language at school. And this is totally a myth and it's false, because what we know from research is actually that children really, it really benefits them if they can maintain their home language and speak more than one language. And many parents come to the UK and they ask me, okay, but should I now only speak English to my child? Should I not speak my home language, my heritage language to my child? And the answer is no, because they're afraid they won't learn English if they don't speak English to them. But actually, they live in an English reality. Everywhere else in London, they hear English, so why wouldn't they learn English? But your home language is what will not be supported if you don't speak it to your child. Okay, so we can move on. What we know from research actually is that multilingual education and being able to speak more than one language promotes cognitive development. So what do we mean by that? So these are functions such as attention, working memory, And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because when you speak more than one language, you constantly have to switch between one language to another, and that requires a lot of attention that monolingual speakers don't have. So you have trained better attention, and also a lot of working memory, because you have to constantly keep active both vocabularies, or sometimes even more than two if you speak more than two languages, so that you can have all of the words available and you can speak them. So that requires a lot of attention and working memory. And also, this is not just linked to cognitive development. Multilingual education is also linked to improvements in creativity, problem solving, and musical skills. So it's quite holistic, and I'll dive into it a bit more later. We can move on, thank you. We also know that, so as I was mentioning before, so if you're able to speak your own language, and if you're able to share your culture with other friends and peers, then you will probably feel more accepted. You feel like you belong, but also you'll be better able to understand other people's perspective, because you can go outside of your box and think, actually, there's not just one culture, there are many different cultures, there can be many different perspectives, and we see that from research. Multilingual children are better at perspective taking, better at empathy, and also better at peer relationships because of this. Thank you. But so what is multilingual education? Because this is such a broad term. So what do we mean by multilingual education? What are we actually researching? Okay, so next please. There are two different kinds of multilingual education practices. We can move to the next slide. Okay, the most common one is the standard dual language program, which usually has a bilingual curriculum where like half of the time they learn the content in one language and half of the time in another. It's done differently in different schools, but that's the main idea. And it's usually nationally recognized. So for example, French, English, 1 hour in French, and then the next hour they switch to English and they learn the next content in English. And then we have newer approaches. So in this first approach, I forgot to say, usually there is a separation. So first one language and then the other language, but the languages are not mixed in the classroom. So you're not learning content in both languages at the same time. But there are also new approaches like translanguaging, which is the idea to go beyond language barriers and actually make sense, so children can make sense in the classroom of what they're learning in all of the languages that they know. So what that looks like in practice is, for example, they're asked to write an essay in English, if English is the language of instruction. But then, for example, if they can speak Urdu or like another language, they're encouraged to maybe write another part of the essay in the language that they know, or share it with other speakers of their language in another language. So that allows them to keep all languages that they know active in the classroom. And there are many other ways in which you can do translanguaging in the classroom, such as finding like afternoon clubs in that specific language, or finding a buddy, so another peer that can speak their own language, so that they feel like they belong a bit more. However, so there is no established policy of multilingualism in the country, which is the main issue, and it's the main reason why we're doing this research. So what happens a lot of time is that these approaches are not widespread because they're not supported by the government. There's no policy that says multilingualism is good in the classroom. And however, this could highly benefit children in the UK. And if we can move on to the next one, please. So most schools that provide multilingual education, unfortunately, remain very private because they don't have to follow specifically the government guidance, or they don't have to rely on the resources from the government. They have their own funds, right? So what this creates is, unfortunately, the idea of elite bilingualism, so, or multilingualism. So only children who are rich enough, who can afford it, can be exposed and can have the resources for multilingual education. And unfortunately, this creates a lot of gaps in the public, especially not just in academics, but also when they grow up later in life. We know from data and research that if you're able to speak more than one language, that really helps you in the job market. It really helps you for your career. And obviously, if you have that from your school, and you will have opportunities later on. So this increases the socioeconomic gap, unfortunately. So going now to our research, we are researching specifically early childhood development. And why is that? Is that because that's a very important stage of development, especially the first years of nursery and primary school. That's where a lot of development happens in terms of cognition, so like attention, working memory, but also in terms of brain development, socio-emotional development, and what we were talking about before in terms of perspective taking, belonging. And next one. In our school, in our project, we have a really large sample. We have 250 bilingual or multilingual speakers aged between 2 and 8, so they're quite young. So they're from 8 different primary schools in London and 2 nurseries. And we have many of the approaches that I mentioned before. We even have a translanguaging approach, which I'm very glad to have. It's the only one in London at the moment, and it's a state school. So that means that if they can do it without any funds, everyone can do it. And then we have many dual language programs and schools. Most of them are private. We have French English, Italian English, Spanish English, Chinese English. And we also have the International School of London, which is quite interesting because they teach 24 different languages. What that means is they don't actually teach all of them. Oh, sorry. But the idea is that if you bring your child to the school and if your child speaks a language that is not taught at the school, they will try to find a teacher for you so that your child can maintain their home language. So this is a really good idea in terms of maintaining home language. They are doing a great job. Next one. So what we're doing is we're trying to compare all of these practices and see how they can affect child development, but holistically. So we're looking at many things. We have quite a large battery of tests. We measure cognitive skills, but also mathematical skills. We also measure the brain, musical skills, and creativity. And I would like to show you some of the tests that we are doing together. I can't show you everything for time constraints, but I would like to show you a few. So also this is a longitudinal study because if we want to track development, we want to have the same children doing the test every 6 months. So that really helps us understand how they develop and how they grow. And we're doing it for 2 years' time. So we have quite a large timeline. And we started in March last year. We're going to end in 2027, so in about 1 year time, a bit more than that. So what do the tests look like? So in terms of cognitive development, we have this task, which is called the dimensional change cursor task, and it looks exactly like that. So children have, by the way, they're like 5, 6 years old. Children have in front of them 2 boxes with shapes and colors, and they're given cards. And so they have to sort the cards according to the instructions. So for example, sometimes they will sort by color and sometimes by shape, and they have to switch between 2. And that, as you can tell, that requires a lot of attention because now I have to think about color and now I have to think about shape. And so there's a lot of switching, and this should mimic kind of the language switch that you have when you speak more than one language. So we do expect multilingual speakers to be better, to have a higher performance at this kind of task, but because it requires a lot of attention. And then there is another task, which is the visuospatial Corsi block. This one measures working memory instead. So what they see is the picture on the top is what they see on the screen at the beginning. So there are some numbers on the screen, randomly allocated, and the children have to tap the numbers in order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And that sounds very easy, but as soon as they tap number 1, all of the other numbers on the screen will disappear. So that requires a lot of working memory because you have to remember where all the numbers are. And by the way, this is a test also done with adults because now you only see 5 numbers on the screen, but it gets up to 10. And when it's about 8, I start to get confused personally. and what we think is that actually children who speak more than one language should be better at these kind of games because they have better trained working memory. And the last one I would like to present is our creativity task, where they're using Lego. This is their favorite task, as you can imagine. And they have to build something with Lego within a time limit. So if we can move on. what we're looking at here is we're looking at originality. So how original is your creation? We're also looking at things like, were you able to follow the instructions that we gave you? But we also look at elaboration, for example. So how detailed is your creation? How elaborate is your creation? And the reason why we do this is because Lego requires a lot of problem solving. So for example, when you have to stick two pieces together, if you're not able to do that, what are you going to do? Are you going to get stuck? Or are you going to think about possible other solutions in which you can create what you want to create? So I want to share some of the creation I have from cycle 1 from my children. And in this cycle, they were 5 to 6 years old, and they were asked to build something that is able to move. And as you can see, the interpretation of that went very differently for all children. And I want to show you. So at the bottom left, we have a child who was trying to build a plane. And the reason why it looks like that is that she said it had to be detached from the ground, but she didn't know how to do it. So that's what she came up with. It's really interesting to see. And then at the top, we have other children who still were able to follow the instructions because they thought about adding wheels, so that it's able to move. But as you can see, the level of details varies a lot between children and the level of originality. And my favorite one personally is the one at the bottom right, because it's, I don't know if you can guess, it's a crocodile. So it's very different from all the other creations, because that child actually said, well, it's able to move and crocodiles can move. And that makes sense, right? But no one else has thought about it. And I have over 200 pictures, over 200 children doing this test. But he was the only one thinking about an animal. So it's really interesting to see how different children think as well. Okay, thank you. How do we hope that this research is going to help? So we hope that we can provide evidence-based recommendations for policymakers and educators to show what a more inclusive environment at school could look like, and how we can improve learning, creativity, and cognitive skills in the classrooms with multilingual education and promoting multiculturalism, multilingualism, and going beyond language barriers. And we would like to make a classroom more inclusive from a very young age, because that's very important, and especially for children from unprivileged backgrounds. And so we would like to show, since we have both state schools and private schools in our study, which is really important because many study in bilingualism and multilingualism in this field, unfortunately only have private schools. So then the question for policymakers is, well, then how can we do it in state schools where we don't have funds? But because we have state schools in our study, and this is one of the first studies with state schools, we want to show that it's possible, even if you don't have funds, that if the teachers are well trained and if it's encouraged, then everyone can do it. And so it can be done in many different socioeconomic statuses. Okay. Next, please. And so this is what we hope that it will look like. We'll be able to better train the teachers. We'll be able to change the curriculum and to make it more inclusive, and also to have access to multilingualism and multiculturalism in state schools and not just in private schools. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you find it interesting. If you have any questions, of course, you can ask at the end. But I would like to now introduce Mژde. Thank you so much.
Okay, can we have the next slides up? Thank you, Gian. Work is more based, it's still based in schools, so I'm still based in the education sector, but I'm looking specifically at the experiences of ethnic. Is this working? Can you all hear me? I just put this down. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll keep it then. So I'm looking specifically at ethnic minority experiences. So specifically girls who are from a Middle Eastern or North African background, and I am honing in on Kurdish girls. So, sorry, can we keep, yeah, thank you. So in this study's context, I'm problematizing the gap in understanding that we have in the education system in the UK of Kurdish girls, both in relation to their outcomes, but more specifically in relation to their aspirations and their experiences. And I question if, and also how, these girls are being investigated academically and what that looks like in practice when it comes to post-16 education. Next slide, please. Okay, so why is this important? So when it comes to looking at a young person's life, there are two key social environments that are really influential. So one of them is the home and the other one is the school. And both of them are incredibly social spaces where you have a lot of interaction that occurs between the children in question, the young people, and also the adults and the peers around them. So, for example, families transmit capital, and capital is not just about money, although it is important when it comes to resources, tutoring, and materials, but capital can also mean cultural capital, artistic capital, the ability to understand how to navigate the UK school system and how much support those parents can give in aiding their children to reach the aspirations which they wish to. Especially from migrant backgrounds, for example, we do have a lot of evidence that immigrant parents tend to nurture a lot of aspiration in relation to social mobility. So the idea that, well, I travel to this country, which is more safer, has more opportunity for you, so you need to, work hard and grab those opportunities where you can. And both schools and home can either complement or clash, okay? So a school can validate a child, or they can marginalize that child, at the same time that a school or a home can devalue a child's sort of sense of self-worth, their abilities, and it can also devalue them too. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So if I give you some context as to why I'm sort of focusing on Kurdish people specifically. So the Kurds are a diaspora in the literature. We're highly heterogeneous, so we have a range of dialects and religious backgrounds, and where we come from in the Middle East can vary greatly as well. So as a result of this fragmentation, we have a lot of Kurdish migration to Europe, specifically to the UK, driven mostly in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And my question is that when it comes to the education sector, Kurds have simply not been studied in relation to what their experiences and aspirations are when it comes to how their ethnicity, their religion, their gender interacts with their schooling experience. So that's why I'm focusing on second generation Kurdish girls in particular. Okay, so education then is a really key site of development, as we've just sort of talked about there. There's loads of facets to how education can shape, and it can make or break somebody's life. So it's not just a space where people go and learn knowledge, it's also a space where your of belonging are being shaped and negotiated. So for a minoritized young woman, that space then isn't just about going in, doing the class and the homework and then leaving. In every interaction that girl is experiencing as a girl, as a Kurdish girl, or as an Arab girl, for example, all sort of this space is entangled with all these factors of gender, ethnicity, heritage, and belonging. And the key debate in my study is this sort of interesting dynamic between agency and structure. So how much does that child have the ability to make it work for themselves based on the environment they find themselves in? Because a young person can only do so much if their environment, whether it's their school or their home, doesn't nurture or doesn't value their aspirations. Okay, so the power of statistics is really important here. There is a really sheer lack of primary data when it comes to Kurdish people in general, but also for Arabs of various nationalities as well. So as a teacher, when I receive a table of the grades and the outcomes of pupils based on ethnicity, we, as a collective Middle Eastern background, get put under other. Okay, and that's incredibly problematic because it means that the data is aggregated and we don't see the specifics and the nuances in the unique experience between an Arab from a Syrian background, an Arab from an Iraqi background, or a Kurdish person from whatever background they come from. And so it makes it seem as if their experiences are all just the same, and it narrows them down to just a similar number. So this highlights then a severe imbalance and the need for more nuanced qualitative data that tries to shed light on the specific experiences a group is going through based on their gender, ethnicity, and so on. And all of this will help in education policy discourse, which tries to promote, as it should, education tries to promote the well-being and the success of a child. Next slide, please. Right, so when it comes to policies in the UK, there have been many waves of changes when it comes to how the government has tried to implement rules or, advice towards ethnic minority students. So since the 1990s, we had a huge sort of rush of interventions called the Aim Higher programs, which tried to get schools to push this narrative that a child has to aim higher, quote unquote. And then since the 2020s, we have what's called a more outcome-based equalities sort of outlook, which is basically where the government says, well, if we can try to make sure that the ethnic category have higher grades than last year, then we're fixing the problem. And what I'm saying is that is not a solution, or that is not the proper solution, because what that does is we live in a neoliberal economy, which basically marketizes education, and it's all based on, well, how well can you do? But it doesn't ask the question of the environment that child is in and how that can limit or perhaps constrain them when it comes to their success in life. And in terms of my study, this is situated with a broader study. So this isn't the first one. There have been multiple studies done previously, especially in Arab communities, which again try to question and investigate how Arab students from a diverse range of European and British backgrounds. So we have, for example, Amir, who highlights how European-born Arabs try to negotiate this idea of being Arab in Europe in their education and in themselves. Taurus in 2024 looked at Muslim Arab pupils and how the impact of securitization from a geopolitical perspective impacted that child's sense of safety and well-being in schools. Chimente in 2019 shows how from being a refugee background can really impact a second generation sense of vulnerability and resilience in their lives when it comes to their career and their aspirations. Okay, so what's missing then? So like I said, it leads to a blind spot in the data. So what this means is the data continues to obscure, and that leads to invisibilization, where that particular group or community is not represented properly in policy and education discourse, and that leads to silencing. Okay, next two, please. So what this means is diversity is being celebrated at lip service. So schools will say, we're diverse, we encourage everyone to speak and to take pride in their background, but it's not being structurally addressed how that actually impacts that child in their success and their outcomes in schools. Next one, please. And so without having disaggregated data that is context specific, the schooling experience will remain under-theorized and unaddressed. Can we just go to the next slide as well? Next one, please. Oh no, sorry, just go back and I'll just end on, yeah. Okay, so solutions then. So my study is going to be a qualitative study where I interview at minimum 30 Kurdish girls in post-16 education from a diverse range of Kurdish backgrounds. And then I will also interview their parents as the next sub-step in the example. And my aim is to sort of question and ask them what their experience of school has been like so far, what choices they have made at GCSE, and how that impacts their choices now in post-16 education. And then from their parents as well, challenges have they experienced and what possible solutions they would like to see schools address to be able to close that gap, not just from a metrics perspective, but from a more qualitative one as well. Okay, I'm going to end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, both of you. Excellent presentation. And they are touching on something very important for us as we speak about culture, which is the language. And language is considered as one of the main aspects of the culture of any society or community. Right. Comments, questions, please.
I think the integration for the children, not assimilation, complete assimilation. And from my experience, I used to work as an outreach officer at the resource unit for the supplementary and mother tongue schools. And your research or study is missing this important thing in the Saturdays school in communities, I think, because for 3 years I saw so many schools, even African, Igbo and Spanish and Chinese and Arabic, Kurdish, so many schools are teaching, especially, and I worked as well in the mother tongue school, Saturday mother tongue school with the Iraq Community Association. And this, they depend on a traditional way of teaching, like the curriculum in Iraq. They used this al-Qira'a al-Khalduniya is not suitable for like قدر قاعدة بقرنا. You can't teach a child here about قدر قاعدة بقرنا. It's so difficult. So I try to teach them with I started with a song, and then they memorized the song, and then I taught them the spelling, and then the pronunciation, and then everything about this alphabets. And also I made so many plays like the Kingdom of Alphabets in the schools. So they learned by these things the mother tongue schools. The mother tongue language is very important. It's the key for culture, to know the culture. And thank you very much. And it's good study.
Thank you very much. I think this kind of study, which I bring this question here, is to how to assimilate your research to the mother tongue languages in Kurdish, Arabic, and others. And that's something. Any other comment or question?
Thank you so much, Dr. Maysam Al-Ansari, consultant gynecologist. Fantastic, fantastic talk. And I hope you will be a pioneer for a policy change in this country. Now, my question to first is, which borough you have conducted, currently conducting your studies? Which borough? Borough.
Which one? Which area? Yeah. So it's everywhere in London, so it's quite spread out.
How many boroughs?
So we literally have East London, North London, South London, West London, so everywhere.
Good, just diversity, that's what by next. And when are you going to publish it? Where?
Okay, so the research is 2 years on, so it will end in over 1 year, and then we'll have to find it. So I think 2 years time for the full research, but I really hope to publish research articles before. Now we've finished cycle 1. There's 4 cycles. Thank you so much. There is 4 cycles, right? We finished cycle 1. It's cycle 2. So at the end of cycle 2, I really hope we can get some comparison to publish, and in science journal. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And I hope the boroughs will be CC your studies, and that will help with their policy makers.
That is our aim. So our aim is that if we can appeal to policymakers, we can actually write something down and bring it to them. So yes, yeah, that would be our dream, obviously.
Perfect. Thank you. Proud of you.
Any other question or comments?
Hi. As an Arabic teacher, what I face all the time, the issue with Arabic books or Arabic sources for teaching the language. The school, all British school, don't provide any sources to study Arabic, even for GCSE. When you go to GCSE past paper, you don't see any sources to for the student to do this. And most of the books are created by individual people. Some of them, they are even not specialists in Arabic. To teach Arabic, you should know Arabic as a second language. You should know the English and the Arabic, because there is two different systems for each language. And there is issue with Arabic students and any diverse students. They talk also to English language. How they talk to English language? They talk in school with their colleagues, with everyone, the proper English, and they go back home, and when they speak English, they speak minor English. They try to make it easy for their parents, because we all, as a first generation, we don't speak English as a first language. So in a school, they face the difficulty to consider them as a proper English people, because I face this in Chiswick High School. They divide the students, all British English people, they put them in set 1 and set 2, and all the minority, they put them in set 3 and set 4. Even my daughter chose the journalist course for this study, and she got A stars full word in A level, but they put her in this level until I fight for her rights. So how we can fix this in British schools? And we need also proper sources to teach Arabic, because what she said about القراءة الخلدونية, which is first book in Arabic book we study in primary school. I use القراءة الخلدونية for just one thing. I use the naughty letters as a teach Arabic letters. There is I call them naughty letters because they don't join, like alif, dal, dal, ra, all these letters. Otherwise, I cannot use القراءة الخلدونية to teach any student Arabic here. So how can we fix this? How can the government help us to get our language as a Kurdish, Arabic, any other language, with sources, with right sources, with the right way to study? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. And yes, this is going back to the idea that we don't have funds because there is no multilingual policy, right? So we don't have the funds for the bilingual books. We don't have the funds for the teachers who speak more than one language and have, for example, Arabic as their and can better support the students. So this is why we do need a multilingual policy in the UK, because there are so many students who speak Arabic, who speak Italian, who speak French, who speak Polish, for example. And unfortunately, they're not well supported. They don't have the resources, the books, the teachers, the support they need. And what you were saying before about Arabic not even being in the curriculum because maybe it's considered a minority language, it's going back to the idea that some languages are considered more important than others. And English, for example, now it's more important because you have to speak English because everyone speaks English and we're in the UK. But actually, is that the whole picture? Is really like, are we like all of us, do we only speak one language? And the answer is no. The majority of people in the UK speak more than one language, but they're not allowed or they're not well supported in that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I can guess you might be born here or you come as a kid. So you understand what you are searching for. What is teach our kids Arabic? There is Saturday Arabic School, yeah. Who has created these schools and take funds from government? They are not specialists in the language, and we send our kids just to link them with our countries. What is your advice? I mean, the kids doesn't like the school. We force them to go. Yeah, they don't like it because there is psychological situation is missed. We have to understand the kids, how they think, then how to teach them. But unfortunately, 3 schools I moved my daughter with, none of them, they understand what is kids mean, their brain mean, and to find a program to teach them. Have you covered in your research? Do you have any advice for these schools?
Yes.
You
so,
can help them, to be honest.
So it's a really good question, and it's a very broad topic that you've brought up. I'll try to answer it as cohesively as possible. So I also come from a family where I was sent to Kurdish school on Saturdays, and I also went to Arabic school. So I also did Arabic GCSE when I was in secondary school. Now, the teachers in those secondary schools are often first generation immigrants, often. And what that means is you have a first generation teacher, immigrant teacher, who is teaching a child who is experiencing English school, or a more Western school, shall we say, where the culture is very different. When my dad and my mum both grew up in Baghdad, when they tell me what school was like, it's a whole other world. And what I was experiencing on the weekends was, very different, often very negative compared to the teachers that I was experiencing in my English secondary school. So I would say when it comes to schools, complementary language schools, they do amazing work. This isn't me trying to criticize them I'm not judging, teachers from a different background or culture. What I will advise is that there needs to be a more concerted effort from language complementary schools, Kurdish, Arab, whatever they might be, to train those teachers using policies and practices that are used in English schools to be able to retain those children and actually have them enjoy coming to school, if that makes sense. The second thing is that in the flip side, Western schools, so UK schools, have to put more effort as well when it comes to their practices and approaches to ensure that they are uplifting the heritage of their so-called ethnic minority students. So as Chadة said, when it comes to policies in multilingualism, I'm pushing for policies that can really help Arabs, Kurds, etc., to feel like they actually have, a sense of like dual or like a hybrid identity that bridges between being Middle Eastern and also being British. So it takes effort from both sides, I think. And it requires a lot of training and a lot of rethinking sort of how we do things. Does that answer your question?
Exactly, to be honest. But I wish these teachers.
Which teachers?
In the Arabic school or college
Yes,
or whatever,
yeah.
They have to pass course of psychology.
Well,
In
that's
Iraq-
what I was
in
saying
Iraq-
about training.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is
Who will
those
train who?
but that's, so again, it goes back to policies. If there's no funding or policy to train teachers in language schools on the weekends, then we can't do anything. So
we pay this schools. They can.
Which schools?
All the schools.
Oh, the Arabic schools, yeah.
All Arabic
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah.
Them.
Yes.
And I think they got fund also from organizations.
Okay, so you have to
So
hold
they
them
can't-
accountable.
I
they're
think
not
I
using that
the
money.
Organization,
Yes.
I believe the organization, they have to control this point.
Okay,
situation.
I understand. Yeah. Yeah, there's no clear policies on government level for complementary schools either. So that's where the problem is. Yeah. Not that I know of. No. There's local councils, but due to a lot of the cuts over the last 10 years with yes. Exactly. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
My question is to both of you. At the age of artificial intelligence, new methods, new technologies, social media, what's best to attract the future generation in our language, I mean Arabic? From another eye, I remember when my children were at the primary school in Tunisia, I used to take to give them courses in English with British Council, with the American Cultural Center, with the French school. And frankly, it's very different from our school. The way they were, the space, start from the space, the atmosphere, the way they were treated. And it really makes them going to that course, and they were very, very happy to that courses. So this makes the difference, maybe.
Any other comment or question? Yep, sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. That's really interesting presentations. I've got two questions. The first one, at what age the best age for a child to be multilingual, and how does that affect the brain health in general?
Question. I get that a lot from parents. The best age to be multilingual is from when you're born. Like, whenever you can introduce multilingualism, that's the good age. This doesn't mean, for example, you can tell from my accent, I learned English later on in my life. That doesn't mean that if you learn a second language later on in your life, it's not good. But the sooner you can learn it, the better. In terms of brain development as well, I did not present that part of my research, but we look at the brain as well with neuroimaging techniques. And so what we see is that actually we see the brain developing differently if more than one language from a very young age. So the best age would be as early as possible.
Yes. Hi, my name is Ameen. I'm one of the medical students from St. George's. Sorry, my weak as I've been under the weather. But I had a question for Chádة, but this can be for both of you because I think it crosses over quite well. Just to give you a bit of background about myself, I grew up in Finland, and the schools I went to were quite bilingual. We learned different subjects in different languages. I think a few of my colleagues as well, back then, they'd come from other countries like Spain, France, Italy, and they'd also have similar schooling systems. I was wondering if you've looked at their methods and how they've implemented things to kind of drive, I guess, instead of reinventing the wheel, to look at what they've done to see if that can be successful here. From an outside perspective, I can also see that I think the British system is quite rigid. You know, if you want to go and do something at like the embassies or whoever, it's just this paperwork, this one, that one. Other places they're quite more simple. You know, I think a lot of these barriers, personally, from looking in, everyone mentions GCSE, A-level, this. In Finland, the only education is from ages 16 to 18. That's the formal one. Before that, my teacher graded me. You know, I think giving that autonomy to teachers can be quite good, from my perspective. But I wanted to kind of get your both of your perspectives on this, and what do you think is the what do you think are the barriers in order to implement this? You know, funding is funding, but we have enough people, like you said, that come here, work, you know, try to find work. The new visa programs that Rishi Sunak created, where people can come here from a top 50, 100 university. They probably know different languages. They can come here in London and get a job. So yeah, what other barriers are there, do you think, in terms of, I guess, implementing it?
I totally understand what you're saying, because many of the papers I read in my field are studies done in North Europe, such as Finland, such as the Netherlands, such as other countries like that. Why, as you said, the UK is very limited in terms of barriers, in terms of what we can do. The curriculum is quite strict, and it's difficult to bend it if there is no policy that says we can do that. So that's why it's difficult to bring approaches such as translanguaging, the one I was saying before about like going beyond language and actually giving more freedom to the teachers to teach the contents. So the content can be there because obviously the content has to be there, but teaching the content in the way that seems more suitable to the class you have in front of you, because each class is going to be different. So going back to the idea of autonomy, I was just editing a paper that has to be published the other day with one of my researchers. And so the paper found that if you give more autonomy, it's really related to this actually. If you give more autonomy to teachers, they will, like the students see an increase in performance, which is amazing. However, the teachers need to know what they're doing. So that was another variable. How long have you been a teacher? How well are you trained? So if we give more autonomy to teachers, we do need really good training on what teachers should be doing, how teaching should look like, and then we can give autonomy. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, but that's a very important point here. I think we got a very important point to mention here. So in my field, in medicine, maybe some of my colleagues here are physicians, there is something called guidelines, and there is something called professional autonomy. The strict guidelines ensure standardization and reduce variability in management. However, it's painful for the physician because it restricts them in certain aspects of their professionality. You have to take what's your aim for quality. Do you want to have hard quality management, or you want soft total quality management? If you go to Helen Markman, she mentioned about the total quality management, you can read more. It's very important, very delicate, but you have to balance it very carefully based on some study and research. Otherwise, if you give more autonomy to the professions, it goes variability. I mentioned here my colleague here, some of the complementary schools have no policies at all because they are very feel independent. This is extreme autonomy here. So we have to balance here according to the need of the society and the group. And we cannot do anything without a good standard research as my colleague doing here. Okay? That's something we have to remember. I have to say something before we finished, because you touch on a very important thing. I am a geriatrician by practice, okay? So I'm doing with old people. And one of the fields which I do is cognitive rehabilitation, which is cognitive stimulation and rehab. And what mentioned here, especially by Chadda, is about is about attention, memory, and visual called spatial. Okay, these three things is actually part of Brain R-Wave program for cognitive rehabilitation, which has been established in UK, and similarly by Neuronation as well. They put 6 things, and the first element is language, memory recall, attention and focus, executive function, praxia, and the last one is gnosis, which is mean speaking with yourself and which language you speak with yourself. Okay, so that's how is the cognitive rehabilitation working as well. But looking at this, so the way we treat people with the cognitive impairment, demented and others, or brain injury, very much is maybe, I don't know, it's maybe come from how we train and teach children. Because when I saw your presentation, I said, God, that looks familiar. I started looking at my papers.
That's a really good comment, and I couldn't include it in my presentation because of time, but there was a part at the end where there was a really important fact, which is, and this has been repeatedly shown in research, not just one time, but it's just a consistent finding, is that multilingual speakers usually see a delay in disease such as Alzheimer's disease of 3 to 5 years, which is huge. It's incredible. And that is because multilingual speakers train a lot more all of these functions, attention, working memory, all of the executive functions.
So that's called part of the neuroplasticity, they call it, is increasing the nerve connection with synapses. The more you use your brain, connecting the right and left side of the brain, the better you are, actually. Yeah, Well, thank you very much. What's the program, Mژده?